get to go and inspire kids to tell them that there's a way to be a cancer survivor, a possible way to be cured, and a great message.
Gary Lezak, he spent decades keeping Kansas City informed, even while facing an incredibly rare cancer. Today, we look back at the challenging diagnosis and the awesome bond between him and his care team. Good morning. We have a fantastic program for you this morning. I'm Alexis Del Cid in for Jessica Lovell. Welcome to the Morning Medical Update. Gary Lezak's passion and personality helped make the meteorologist a household name in the Kansas City metro, really across Kansas. But did you know, back in 1999, a rollerblading injury led to a cancer diagnosis. Doctors found a rare and highly aggressive bone cancer called extraskeletal osteosarcoma. And today we're asking, where are they now? And where is he now? Well, fast forward 24 years later, he's here. We are so thrilled to have Gary Lezak joining us this morning to share his cancer journey. Good morning. You're in Colorado, right?
Yeah, good morning. I'm in Lakewood, Colorado, right next to Golden, Colorado. And I moved here with Andy about 2 months ago with Rainbow and Sunny, my dogs, and trying to stay healthy and fit. And it's easier to stay fit here in Colorado. There's a lot of hiking to be done.
And no humidity. It's much easier.
No humidity, it really is true.
We're going to get to all your newest and greatest adventures in just a little bit, Gary. Also here in the studio with me is Gary's orthopedic oncologist, Dr. Howard Rosenthal. Thank you so much for being here this morning, Dr. Rosenthal.
Good morning. Good morning to you, and thank you. And hello, Gary.
You have quite a list of credentials. I just want to make sure that we let our audience know. You're the medical director of the Sarcoma Center at the University of Kansas Cancer Center.
That's right. We started the Sarcoma Center about 10 or 12 years ago, serving multiple states in the Midwest, treating patients with sarcoma.
And now enter Gary. Gary, I want you to take us back to when you first learned you had this super rare cancer. How did rollerblading tie into that?
Well, I had just started and became chief meteorologist at KSHB 41, and it was back in 1999, July, when I started, and just a week or two after I started as chief meteorologist, I went rollerblading. Andy said, hey, I'll teach you how to rollerblade. It's just my second time rollerblading, and we were in Shawnee. We came to these hills, and he said, watch, you'll stop. He went down the hill, came up the other side. He's about maybe a football field away, and saying, say, Gary, you can stop when you come up this other side. There's the Rainbow and Sunny had just walked in, by the way. And so I started down that stretch there, and within 5 feet, I panicked, I fell, and I broke this wrist, my right wrist. And when my wrist broke, we knew about that within a few hours. It was so painful. I had a cast on, and when you have a broken bone in your wrist, it's different than breaking your bone. Dr. Roosevelt probably knows that. But the navicular bone it takes a long time to heal. So I had to have a cast on for 8 weeks. 3 weeks, 4 weeks in, they replaced the cast and put a new cast on because it gets dirty. And when the new cast was put on, I saw something right in here where you see my scar. I saw something right there. It was growing. It was a big lump. And I asked the doctor, Dr. Wood, I think was his name at the time, and he says, wow, that is interesting. He brought his nurse. She thought it was amazing and thought it was interesting and scary looking. So I had an ultrasound done, and about 2 or 3 days later, and the ultrasound doctor actually felt under my arms, I guess for lymph nodes or whatever, I don't know what, but they seemed panicked that there was really an unusual thing that they showed up on the ultrasound. And then I think we did a biopsy, and I met Dr. Rosenthal a couple weeks later maybe, and he walks in with Kim Haynes, and Andy and me, I was told to go to the doctor. It looks like I might have a possible type of bone cancer, and in walks Dr. Rosenthal. Kim Haynes, I think an intern, 3 people. I've never had 3 people walk into a doctor's office before, and it was like somewhat intimidating, but also more serious. And he immediately diagnosed me with extraskeletal osteogenic sarcoma, or out of the bone cancer, and out of the bone cancer. And so it had, like, I'll let Dr. Rosenthal talk about a little bit more about that rare tumor, but we found out later that it was actually really, really super aggressive. So that's how I found out.
Well, thank God you aren't great at rollerblading.
Yeah, if I don't break this wrist,
You're
I'm
not here
probably
today.
not here. Yeah, I might not be here. Dr. Rosenthal can tell me, because I might have waited. I mean, I was a typical guy who didn't go to the doctor. I might have waited 6 months. 6 months
To get that
could have been
lump
too
checked
long.
out. So we do have some footage from one of your very early appointments. Gary, do you remember your first impression of Dr. Rosenthal? That's you too?
That's me. I sort of don't recognize myself, but I also have trouble recognizing that 12-year-old that I'm talking to.
Wow.
So what was your first impression of Dr. Rosenthal, Gary?
Extremely impressive. I mean, immediately credible. He just oozed credibility, and I immediately knew that what he was saying to me was going to be, really important. And he diagnosed me, but I was very impressed. I mean, to this day, he's one of the greatest people I've ever met.
Oh my gosh, what a nice compliment.
Thank you.
How rare is the cancer that Gary had?
Sure. So first of all sarcomas are extraordinarily rare. There are about 80 different types of sarcomas, both bone and soft tissue, and altogether they represent less than 1% of all cancers. Gary's was an osteosarcoma, and I'll get back to that in a second, but osteosarcoma, being the most common bone-forming bone cancer, represents only about 500 cases a year in the country, of which about 80% are in children. Extraskeletal osteosarcoma,
which is what he had,
represents about 4% of all osteosarcomas. So you're talking about 10, 12 people a year in the country. The largest series, for example, I looked up recently, the largest series talks about 50 extraskeletal osteosarcomas over a 30-year period of time.
Oh, wow.
That's how rare this is.
Well, we always knew you were a rare kind of guy, Gary.
Wow.
This was before he was the Gary Lezak. He's just the new young meteorologist in town,
well,
right?
The one thing I do remember, he was Gary Lezak, and he would always come with his dogs to the clinic.
Oh, that's right.
When Stormy first came.
Before this, yeah.
Yes.
And so,
it was Wendy first, Dr. Rosenthal.
Wendy, that's right.
Wendy
That's
was
right.
10 years old, and at the time, and Wendy was a part of my whole therapy, my whole support team. I developed a whole support team naturally through people in Kansas City fans and viewers, and it became a huge support team. I got hundreds of cards as I went through my treatments. We could talk about that here in a minute, but Wendy was part of my support team, and then Stormy came a little bit later, and I've had Wendy and Stormy and Breezy, and now Rainbow and Sunny.
When we talk about it being an aggressive cancer, what does that look like to you as a doctor?
So an aggressive or high-grade extraskeletal osteosarcoma, they're tough to deal with. They're treated with both surgery and chemotherapy. Occasionally even we'll do radiation. But they are aggressive. They have a high propensity to spread to other organs, specifically to lungs. They carry a fairly high mortality rate, meaning that there's a high level of succumbing to that cancer with this diagnosis.
When it comes to the specific location that Gary's cancer was amputation ever on the table?
Right, so good question. Since the early 90s, we're treating the vast majority of sarcomas through what we call limb preservation or limb salvage techniques, preserving the limb. For extraskeletal osteosarcoma, because of the aggressiveness and the typical locations where they occur, about 30% end up being treated with amputation, compared with that number being about 5% for all other sarcomas. So yes, amputation was certainly on the table.
Gary, what do you remember about it?
Alexis, let me just add to that a little bit. It's because one thing I highly recommend for anybody who's going through any kind of cancer, and especially this rare kind, extraskeletal osteogenic sarcoma, and all the sarcoma patients out there, do some of your own research. Really dive into trying your hardest to find out as much as you can about your own treatment that you're about to go through. I did that, and I went back through the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, as Dr. Rosenthal said, and before the early 90s, amputation was more likely. It was like, I believe, Dr. Rosenthal can speak to that, but before the early 90s, it was like, oh, that cancer is so dangerous, so it spread so much, it'd be safer to cut off like my left arm, So instead of that happening, I learned, I read in early 90s, just 7, 8, 9 years before my diagnosis, this new technique started developing. And then, of course, Dr. Rosenthal being the ultimate expert at limb preservation, and I did research, we talked about it, and he, of course, knew exactly how it had evolved, and he told me that my arm's going to be preserved, or we're going to try to get rid of the cancer would be the first main goal. But anyway, just learn as much as you can about this.
What was your treatment plan like? What did that look like for you, Gary?
Well, it's interesting. I have my diary, believe it or not, Dr. Rosenthal, from 1999, okay? I haven't kept a diary in the last 15 years or so, but up through 1999, and I wrote on October 31st, 1999, the day before I went into chemotherapy, Chiefs 34, Chargers nothing. All right, that's the first thing. So the Chiefs won that game, 34-0 over the Chargers. But on that day, I wrote, I go into the hospital tomorrow morning. There aren't enough hours in the day. I need another day. But no, I go in and I'm as healthy as can be. I played football today. And then I says, but I have to go into the hospital at 7:30 a.m. surgery. And then by afternoon, I begin getting ifosfamide and adriamycin. I will write more tomorrow. I will deal with this day by day. I need one more day, but I don't get it. Perhaps by March or April, I'll begin feeling like I do now, which is perfect. And then at 2:43 p.m. on the next day, on November 1st, ifosfamide and adriamycin are flowing into my body. The goal, kill all cancer cells so I can live happily ever after. The surgery went well this morning, and I have an internal portocath. I feel great. I will battle through this. Anyway, that's how it all began. I learned about adriamycin and ifosfamide. And Dr. Rosenthal, I think it's still used today, right?
Yes, actually, that's part of the treatment today. The advances, both surgically and from a medical chemotherapy or immunotherapy standpoint, have made remarkable advances over the past 20 years as well. So we actually are curing the vast majority of extraskeletal osteosarcomas, as well as most other sarcomas as well. That's obviously exciting for me. I'm just going to reiterate, because Gary, you're 100% right. Those patients that are involved with their care, that ask the appropriate questions, that do the research on their own, they tend to do better. And I enjoy that because it's intellectually stimulating for me to be able to answer those questions, keeping the patient involved with their own care. So you're entirely correct in what you did.
How much does Gary's mental state play a role? I mean, hearing him read from his diary, it's not a diary of despair. Gary, did you ever get the blues or get in the weeds about this? Or were you always just, I'm going to beat this thing?
Yeah, we could read a whole bunch more, but it's basically I was scared. And Andy, my partner, and we were just, partners for about a year at that point. We're now together for 25 plus years, which is amazing, 25 years now. But we were scared. I knew what I was facing when I first met the medical oncologist. I didn't like that first guy I met because he said he was going to take me this close to death. And even though he was telling me the truth with adriamycin and ifosfamide, I didn't want to be that pessimistic. I wanted the optimistic view. So I went to see another medical oncologist and went with him. But I was scared. Andy and I both developed this attitude that we were going to beat it and this was going to be exciting. And as scared as you can be about some things and facing your fears, you can also be excited about, wow, when we get through this, I'll be able to be sitting here 24 years later and talking to you on this show and explaining how you can get cancer, and there's a possibility, we'll talk a little bit later, about not just being a cancer survivor, but being cured. And then you can tell your story to inspire others so then they can be survivors and possibly be cured as well. So as scared as I was, Alexis and Dr. Rosenthal, I was somewhat excited about going through the experience. That was my attitude. That's sort of how I deal with a lot of things in life. Not everything, but a lot of things.
You kept working as well as a meteorologist throughout your entire cancer treatment, which, you know, if people outside the business watch you, you make it look effortless because you're so good at what you do, but that takes a lot of energy. So how did you handle giving so much of yourself in your career? And it's a show every single day, combined with being treated for cancer at the same time.
When I first started my career, I thought I was going to be the meteorologist that gets it exciting, but so it's entertain, educate, inform. So I'm just being myself, excited about the weather, and I do that. So I treated this diagnosis somewhat in the same path. I get to educate the viewers and inform the viewers. We went through the treatments. Cynthia Newsom of KSHB 41 came in and did a whole story right at the beginning when I was in for my first series of chemotherapy treatments. Jeff Penner and others would bring me weather data so I could look at the weather data. I don't know how much was on computer models at the time on our computer, on our laptop, and I don't think iPad had existed yet. But I continued my life while I was in the hospital, and then the outpouring of support. I was fortunate to being an on-air personality to have a huge, natural, positive support system from the community. And Kansas City was just a huge part of staying positive because I got such great support from viewers. I got all these cards. I said 800, 1,000 of them at the time. Nowadays, it would probably all come through email or online somehow. But it was amazing. So for whoever it is, a lot of you aren't going to be celebrities and get that kind of support, but develop your support system, your family, your friends, and get that positive group of people around you to help you get through this.
We want to remind our audience that we love when you send questions and comments and give shout outs to our guests. So you can always reach us live during the program in the chat section of YouTube or Facebook. You can tweet us, you can email the Medical News Network. All that information on how to connect with us right now is on your screen. Dr. Rosenthal, how often did you follow up with Gary once the treatment began?
So the follow-up is long-term, minimally 10 years, but I tend to follow patients for life. For the first 2 years after the surgery, I follow him every 3 months, and that's with clinical examination, CAT scans, MRI scans, and so forth. Then for the next 3 years, we'll typically go every 6 months. Every 6 months, and then for the 5 years thereafter, every year. And then after that, I'll typically see him every year as well. And that's for clinical examination and occasional CAT scans and so forth. With Gary, we've become friends over the past 24 years. So we'll go out to lunch periodically. We'll talk about other things, including more personal things between ourselves. And it's really been, I'll say, inspirational for me as well, being able to deal with this.
And is Gary now, do you use the word former patient? Or is he a current patient? Is he
Well, he's always invited back, so I
Right,
think he's
right.
there.
But is he 100% cured? What's the word we use
Yes,
when we
he
talk
would
about
be
Gary?
considered cured, although, as he was alluding to, patients with cancers tend to always realize they had a cancer. Even if they know in their hearts they're cured, it's something that still lives inside of them. So that's why I follow patients for so long, is because there's always something that comes up. If he develops a lump somewhere else on his body, while anybody else without a history of cancer might not worry about it, Gary has more of a right than anybody else because of his history to come on in and, hey, let's just get this checked out.
Was that something, Gary, that you felt to be stressful each time leading up to one of your follow-ups?
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to when Dr. Rosenthal went through the whole process, you know, I had an extremely aggressive cancer, as aggressive as cancers get, as Dr. Rosenthal alluded to when I first found out about it. And so we went through the very aggressive treatment. I was 36 years old at the time, I believe, or something like that. Maybe, yeah, I think so. How old was I? Whatever. It was a long time ago. Okay. And so
it was 4 dog years.
After I was done with chemotherapy in that January, February, March, and your immune system is really sacrificed at that point, and then you start getting stronger again. But because it was so aggressive, and it was decided not to have radiation for me at the end, which was good because Dr. Rosenthal and the team of doctors thought maybe I could just feel my arm and see if anything's coming back, and then we do a CAT scan. So I would literally have a test every 2 months. So I would have a test 2 months in, and on an MRI. You have to lay there and put your arm up, and for a half hour or whatever, it would seem like forever. It sort of hurt, and then you find out if you're clear, and then you have a CT scan because sarcomas love to go back to the lungs. That's where they love to go. So you have it every 2 months for the first 2 years because it was so aggressive. If something showed up in my lungs, it's immediate surgery, I was told, and as the doctor explained. But if it doesn't show up, you don't have to have surgery, obviously. So in every single 2 month period for the first year or two, and then it was every 3 months, and then it was every 6 months, then it was once a year, Kim Haynes would call me up, and the phone call would come in, and you never know. Gary, you are clear. Oh my gosh. That is like the greatest. Every 2 months you get that. You don't know. It is scary. You take the test, and then 2 days later, you get the call. And every single one of my calls was, you are clear, you are clear, you are clear, all the way through. I was very fortunate. I didn't have any major setbacks. And a few issues here and there, but nothing major setbacks happened. And then we got to that 15-year point. And at 15 years, which is hard to believe, Doctor, 9 years ago, I go in there, and he said the C word, the other C word, cured. Oh, and even though, Dr. Rosenthal, even though you said the beautiful C word, cured, you explained to me, if it does ever come back, it would have been a cell that has been in my body for 15 plus years, and it would probably be a very, very weak version of that cancer. Is that true?
Yes, I mean, there are mutations that occur. I consider myself a paranoid optimist. I'm always worried about things, but we always hope for the best. And by being diligent, we'll catch things if they ever occur. But again, the likelihood of yours ever coming back, either locally in the arm or in the lungs, is as low as it is, pretty much equivalent to anybody else.
Right. Something that is remarkable listening to Gary, and I'm sure you feel this when you're with him, socially even, is that you're so filled with gratitude to the viewers and the people who supported you in the community. You have a framed article on your wall that the Kansas City Star did for you as you weathered the storm of cancer. Why do you
right
keep
here
things
in front
like
of me
that?
when you're showing there. Yeah.
Why do you keep things like that framed?
Well, it's just amazing. That was just a few months later. Another thing that happened, and I don't know if I discussed it in that article or not, but to get back to your normal routine as fast as you can is good, and to set a goal. Andy and I set a goal that we're going to go to Hawaii, to my favorite place on Kauai, at this condo at Kuhio Shores, and we set a goal to do that as soon as we could. And so a few months after chemotherapy, we accomplished that goal and went to Hawaii to celebrate me being healthy, even though it was still early. The cancer could have easily have come back, and it never did. But I think it's important to set a goal. And I believe it's in this article, Strength Through the Storm. And it's just inspiring to me and to remind me of how important every day of our lives are, every single day. It's challenging for all of us to just enjoy the moment and enjoy now and enjoy every day. And so that inspires me to do it. It's right in front of me here.
So Gary, before we get to the community questions and our COVID update, I got to ask, so what is your day like now? You're cancer-free, more than 20 years. How are you spending your days?
Well, I've got an entrepreneurial startup called Weather 2020 LLC, weather2020.com, and I discovered behind me on this mural you see back here is the year I discovered, I don't know if you can see it up there, 1987, 1988. The year I discovered that the weather patterns are cycling. So this is a technology. I've got a model that's patent pending. That's a global weather model that companies around the world are starting to use the data to help save lives and mitigate losses and generate revenue. So I've got that I'm working on relentlessly. It's one of the reasons I moved to Colorado, and still miss Kansas City a lot. But that's what I do every single day of my life. I'm obsessed with weather. Since I was 5 years old, all I want to do is tell people about the weather. Today, there's a couple clouds already starting to form. There may be a thunderstorm later this afternoon somewhere nearby, and I'll be monitoring that and watching that. And that's sort of my passion from when I was a little kid, and I hope to bring this technology to the world, which I think in the next year I'm going to succeed at it.
Well, no doubt you're going to succeed at whatever you do.
I do have the real reason I think Gary moved to Colorado, and it was to get out of an embarrassing situation, because we used to hold a sarcoma awareness day where we'd invite all the families of the children with cancer and so forth. We'd have an event, and one year we were having it at a lake house, and I'll be real quick about this, but Gary and I had a contest. It was a hula hoop contest.
Oh, really?
Who could last longest? And the bet was whoever lost had to drink a beverage from the shoe of the one who won. And I'm proud to announce that I won. Gary had a drink from my shoe. I just happened to have a sandal that had a little flask in it, so it was okay. But I don't know if he ever lived that down.
Why do we not have pictures of Gary hula hooping? Or you, Dr. Rosenthal?
Well, there's a reason for me.
I should have gone back and found those, but it's true. I mean, Howard Rosenthal, Dr. Rosenthal is a hula hoop master. I mean, I didn't know that. And so I can hold the hula up for like 15 to 30 seconds, but he could do it for like a half hour.
How long did you go for?
I don't know. Long enough to watch him drink.
Drink out of your shoe. We're going to take just a quick break to talk about COVID count. Good news is COVID numbers remain very low. Dr. Dana Hawkinson is off today, and if you watched Wednesday's episode, you'll probably have a good idea. He had the worst allergic reaction, you guys, from doing some gardening outside, whatever he was holding in his arms. Allergic reaction is running its course. He's uncomfortable, but he's a champ, so he'll be back soon. COVID numbers are low. Real quick, do we have any reporter questions today on the line? Because we have plenty of questions from our community, so let's get right to those. Marcy has a question for Dr. Rosenthal. When you use the word cured, you're talking about Gary's cancer. So he is officially cured. You talk about how mentally he still has to worry a little bit, but Marcy wants clarification.
So cured is always a word that when are you truly cured? Is it mentally cured? Is it physiologically cured? We talk about long-term survival. Once you're at a certain point in time, 10 years, for example, for this type of cancer, we do consider you cured, meaning the likelihood of this cancer coming back is so remote as to almost be negligible, for obviously statistically insignificant.
Marcia has a question for you, Dr. Rosenthal. What words of wisdom can you share for other cancer survivors? And then she wants to know the same question for Gary. So Dr. Rosenthal, I'll start with you.
So I would say if you've had cancer, you look at life differently and you take advantage of it. You have to take advantage of it. You have to realize how precious it is. Gary's life was almost taken away from him. In fact, the likelihood was more greater that he would not survive than the fact that he did. So he appreciates life, and you take advantage of every experience, the way you look at things, what you want to do.
Gary?
And I agree with Dr. Rosenthal. He just scared me. He's like, I was more likely to not make it than to make it when you get diagnosed with something as serious as osteogenic sarcoma out of the bone, extraskeletal especially. And so, yes, I learned to appreciate life, but really early diagnosis. If you see anything that's suspicious, don't wait. Don't wait. The earlier, the better to get detected and start treatments and get rid of it. And then you can be sitting here like me and still trying to enjoy every single day of our life, which is always challenging for all of us.
A viewer, Jan Vineyard, just wrote in a message to you specifically. Jan writes, I am another one of Dr. R's success stories. I still have my leg after 7 years from myeloma surgery. So that is really special. People see.
Yes, and that's inspirational again for me, because in all honesty, we are curing most patients with sarcoma, and we're doing so in a limb preservation mode, allowing them to get back to their lives. And at the 10 years, and Gary will attest to this, I always ask my patients, do you think about your cancer anymore? Do you think about the entire experience? And to me, success is when patients say, no, I'm now a normal person without cancer, and I'm living life to my fullest. And most of them say, and for myself as well, again, it's the way you look at life, the way you experience your relationships with other people, really I think is advanced when you see the world through a cancer victim's life.
And a survivor.
Yes.
Gary, what do you want your viewers right now to know, people watching?
I just want them to know that I'm doing fantastic. I miss Kansas City. I actually miss the humidity a little bit, but I just love every day. And thank you for your support through all these years. And let's follow as we go forward as I try to bring this discovery to the world. And you can follow me through Facebook, etc. But just enjoy now. Right now is all we have, all right? The future is going to be whatever it is. The past is whatever it was. But today, let's enjoy today. That's the message I have.
My motto is when people say you only live once, I don't think that's true. You only die once. You live every day.
Oh, I love that.
Wow.
I love that.
I love that.
Dr. Rosenthal, thank you. Gary, so wonderful to see you again. We miss seeing you on the air. I miss figuring out what you were going to wear each night. I loved seeing, okay, what's his tie going to look like? What's his shirt, his suit? You just had the best outfits and the best forecast, so thank you.
I still have all my thousands, well, I don't know, thousands. I've got all my ties, thousands of dollars worth of ties, let's put it that way. But I didn't get rid of any of my ties yet, so I have a whole tie collection still, but I haven't worn one in a long time.
Well, that's good. That's how it should be when you try something new and you're not getting up in front of the camera every day. Thank you so much, and thank you to our guests for joining the conversation and our viewers. We will be right back here on Monday morning. Have a great weekend.
Coming up Monday on the Morning Medical Update.
When her baby developed yellow bumps on her skin, this mother says doctors accused her of not bathing her enough. The power of a second opinion found the real cause. I'm Alexis Del Cid. On the next Morning Medical Update, the rare and severe genetic problem and the life-saving treatment giving this family hope. Monday at 8.
Subscribe to our Morning Medical Update and Open Mics with Dr. Stites podcast. Now, everywhere podcasts are available.